So the Marlins did make a move today. They did option Bryan De La Cruz, AAA Jacksonville, and Tommy Nance is now part of the active roster. What are your thoughts about this? And let's start with Mr. Eli.
The only people caught off guard by this were the ones that didn't necessarily wrap their minds around what the Marlins did this offseason. So they added Avi Garcia, they added Jorge Soler, they added Joey Wendell, and they didn't really get rid of any bats. So you just look at the depth chart, and it was Soler and Avi and Jesus Sanchez as the top three starting outfielders. And there were times like during the offseason where we thought, hey, DLC as your fourth outfielder, that's awesome. He's like overqualified for that role. They're in great shape. But again, you need to remember they didn't get rid of anybody. So when they go into the season and everybody's actually healthy, including Brian Anderson, and they want to get Brian Anderson playing time, he has experience in the outfield. He has a much longer major league track record than DLC does. He's been functioning as the fourth outfielder. He's the fourth outfielder. That's how most of this year's been going. He's played some third base. He's played more in the corner outfield spots, and that makes DLC like the fifth outfielder. And once the roster sizes went down, the only surprise was that this didn't happen a few days ago, because I thought as soon as it went down from 28 to 26, you don't need five outfielders, and you need to recognize how Brian Anderson is being used on this team. So they waited a few extra days. He performed about as well as could be expected in his role, but it just was not a substantial role, and it just was not complementary with the other veteran outfielders, mainly because all of them except for Jesus Sanchez bat from the right side. They built a roster with this in mind, with DLC in mind as like the fifth guy on the depth chart. They've been fortunate that everybody's been healthy, so it's created this really weird situation, but a good problem to have. So that's the bottom line. Is he still in the organization? You're going to see him back up. I would venture a guess you see him back up within this month, before May 31st. He's going to be back up for some reason when it makes more sense for the roster's composition. At this very moment, he just did not have a substantial role to play, in my opinion, and I understand the move.
Some stats on Bryan De La Cruz in 16 games, 316 average, slugging 474, an OPS of 914. So, when you bring down a hitter like that and bring in another reliever, just what are your guys' thoughts on especially that the way Bryan De La Cruz has been performing? And let's go to Isaac. What are your thoughts on this?
It was also more of a situation where they needed a fresh arm really badly for this 16-game stretch, and DLC was the one guy that it was expendable. John Burry, like I said, I don't like him in the outfield. He did play some center field this weekend or during the week against Arizona. He was in center field yesterday, actually. And, like Eli said, you have Brian Anderson who can play left and right really well, actually. So like he said, he is the fourth outfielder, and DLC is the one expendable guy that can be sent down. So it made perfect sense that Tommy Nance gets called up, he gets sent down, and I would not be surprised if even before the 16-game streak in 16 days is over, DLC might be back up.
Yeah, and everybody's with you, Dan Locked, that DLC is the better player right now. But the reality of the roster that they have, you need to keep in mind just the flexibility they have with certain players, such as DLC, whereas Avi Garcia, he's at the opposite end of the spectrum. He's got no minor league options left. He's got the biggest contract, and it's still early enough in the year that they aren't going to do anything drastic with him yet.
Yeah.
There comes a point, if this somehow continues with Avi, as bad as it's been, then they make some really uncomfortable decisions. But to this point, they're being patient, and honestly, I think that's the most appropriate move, even though it doesn't feel great at the moment. It's a lot on Avi. Things are going to get really uncomfortable for him if he doesn't have a really strong road trip.
If it's only going to be for a certain period of time, like, I don't know, I like DLC a little bit better in the outfield defensively, and I think he can hit the ball just as good as John Birdie, if not better, over long periods of time. You got to remember, Birdie struggled a lot last year, so he's doing good now.
John Birdie hit 2 home runs yesterday. Just want to let you know.
Well, one game.
I know, but he's been the best, one of the best hitters on the team,
And he's been a little injury prone also. So
he has, but you can't blame the guy for getting hit in the back of the head and getting a concussion.
How long are we talking this option here? Like, if it's a couple weeks, I mean, maybe Birdie. But if it's like a few months, I mean, I don't want to see Birdie go either. I just think I agree with you guys that it's the bullpen depth. It's just about bullpen depth. I like seeing De La Cruz off the bench in the late innings.
Well, I think just as much as
Does Bird even have minor league options?
He does. He is earning more money than De La Cruz is at this time. And that teams are always uncomfortable sending guys down to the minors when they're ready in their arbitration years. The thing that relates these two guys is sending down DLC. It makes John Birdie the backup center fielder. It is showing a lot of faith in him being a viable center fielder. And one of the keys, the differentiator, even if you believe like DLC is the better hitter, his true talent is better, what Birdie has is his really incredible base running and how that could be used later in games. DLC is not particularly special in that regard. And Birdie is somebody that almost everybody except for Jazz, you could see him pinch running at some point in a critical situation, especially when you're talking about extra innings and the runner on second. As somebody, if he's not even in the lineup on that day, he could still make an impact in that way. So it was between those two, it was a good problem to have. But ultimately, the reason why they're in this situation is, of course, because their big money outfielders are both underperforming. So now you don't know exactly what to believe in this offense moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it was a really easy choice. If it was between John Birdie and DLC, John Birdie's been a really valuable piece for this Major League Ball club. He's already produced a 0.7 wins above replacement in very limited sample size. He's a pitch runner. He's the best base runner on the team, maybe behind Jazz. And I just think, DLC, he's got a good hit tool, and that's maybe about it. So I think Birdie, he can do it all. He can